99-cent rental.
This is 99 Cent Rental. I'm your host, Brian White, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave White. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Oh, hi. Thank you for asking. I'm well. You know what I was thinking about earlier today?
What's that?
You remember season 3 of Real World and the episode where Steven slapped Irene in the face because she called him gay?
No.
That was it was the slap heard around the world, as they said on MTV at the time. And I was thinking, I can't think of a better depiction of 90s attitudes towards gender and sexuality than that.
Yeah, I think the only thing I remember about, I don't think I've ever seen a single episode or even so much as a few minutes of The Real World, in spite of the fact that it kind of changed the shape of MTV. And
how is that even possible that you never even saw a few minutes?
Not once. No, that's not true at all, because the only thing I remember is that season with that guy Puck. And they also had a dude on the show who was gay, and it was Pedro, like Pedro, and it was a really big deal because there's a lot of static between those two.
So that's all the season before this season, and this is the one. I think this was Seattle, and she called him gay. And let's be honest, I'm pretty sure Steven was gay, but she called him gay, and then she was leaving the show, and he slapped her in the face, and then grabbed her teddy bear and threw it into the river. Hard,
that's television, man.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Why were you thinking about this?
I have no idea. I think because perhaps apropos of our film, I was thinking about 90s and 90s sexuality.
All right, yeah. Because this movie here, it's pretty 90s.
It's a doozy.
Yeah, right. Hey, so it's hard to explain to someone who never had the experience of what a trip to the video store was like back in the day. The shelves were choked with absolutely bizarre crap made on tiny budgets, completely divorced from any recognizable reality, and it was the best. We intend to talk about every one of them. And just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. Dave's over there at That Queerwolf. Mm-hmm. Give us a follow. Why don't you? Mm-hmm. You know, and I know you're over there on Instagram. You want to have a little fun? We have fun. Have fun with us.
You're just like, oh no, somebody shot Donald Trump. I need to distract myself. What am I gonna do? And like, well, I mean, do you like screenshots from Scooby-Doo? Because I post a lot of those.
Yep.
What?
Yep. I'm also on TikTok. I'm gonna stop saying it with that sort of like, oh god, TikTok, because I will say this.
I won't.
I do kind of have a little fun over there. I mean, everybody on Instagram sees my TikTok shit anyways, but like, I don't know. I've been enjoying myself over there a little bit more. So yeah, follow us over there. Look us up by name. We're easy to find. And if you don't know, we have another show called Bring Me the Axe. Our latest episode covering Return of the Living Dead is out now, and we'll be back next week with a look at John Carpenter's spooky ghost story, The Fog.
Oh my God, it's one of my favorite horror movies.
Yeah, I am very much looking forward to this one. Yep. You can also contact us directly at 99centrentalpod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a cheesy movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. Yeah. Speaking of which, Bridget threw one at me today that I think would be a good one for this show. And
was it Return to Oz?
It was Return to Oz, yeah.
Yes. She told me about that the other day.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll have to get that one on there. I'm surprised we haven't done that one already. Lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'd be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor and give the episode a like and leave a comment. We do like hearing from you guys.
Yeah, look, it'd be a little quid pro quo. Like you leave a review for us, and then I will leave a review for you. And I will review you and your work. I have very high standards. And I am occasionally very mean.
And the engagement over on YouTube is important. We're actually growing pretty steadily on YouTube, which is funny because we don't really spend a whole lot of time over there.
I hear it's where all the podcasts are going.
Yeah. Anyway,
which I don't understand, because to me, in my head, YouTube is still like 2001, where I'm like, why do I want to watch old commercials and clips of television shows from 1992?
Hey, there's something for everybody over there.
I guess.
Yeah. I just want to get that all out of the way right at the top of the show, because holy shit, here comes the trailer.
Crash victim?
Yes. There's
seem to be 3 times as many cars as there were before the accident.
I need to see you, Ballard. I need to talk to you about the project.
Beyond pleasure. Beyond pain. Beyond obsession.
It's something we are all intimately involved in.
Lies the rapture and the rage of Crash. Alliance Releasing invites you to fasten your seatbelt.
You coming?
Crash.
Yeah, Crash.
Let me tell you something. It took about 4 tries before I found any trailer that I could use for social media.
Really?
Man, the other ones are red band trailers, and whoo!
Man. Yeah, holy shit. I remember when the trailer for this was running. And I was like, "Holy shit! Like, what is this? Because this is not the David Cronenberg I'm familiar with."
Yeah, this is not your father's David Cronenberg. Believe me.
Yeah, holy shit!
I actually would argue that it is. This is very much in keeping with his themes.
Yeah, and also by the way, he's deep in the 90s by this point, and
and it shows.
And
does it show?
His 90s period is way different than his 80s period, which is also quite different from his 70s period, and this is a man with eras. It's
Jesus.
And
I actually am not. I don't much care for his newer movies. I mean, they're fine, I guess, but I watched Existence maybe 6 months ago or so, 8 months ago. That is not a good movie.
No. It's, you know what the thing with that movie is it falls in that period where everybody was making their little Matrix movies. Like there's that, and there's I think it was a movie called The 13th Floor, which was something that was very, very similar to the Matrix. Like everybody wanted that sort of thing, and like nobody could quite pull it off, you know.
No, and he fumbles through that movie very obviously as someone who does not quite understand the subject matter. And I would argue the same is a little bit true here, though it's less about subject matter and more about he's not quite sure what he's trying to say.
I'll give you that.
I will say, having said that, I will say this up front. I think within this movie, there is a very, very good movie that is kind of overshadowed by controversy and maybe some unnecessary gratuitous bullshit.
Yeah. For sure, because by the this movie really kind of has me until like probably the last 15 minutes when it feels like somebody was like, "All right, David, we got to wrap this up." So
well, it's a little bit like when we did The Brood. And he's doing The Brood, and he's like, "Oh," it gets to the end, he's like, "Oh shit, I'm David Cronenberg though."
yeah. My God. I mean, what a fucking movie. I mean, I intend to talk about the controversy and all the shit because like this is a movie that is squarely in my wheelhouse because like it comes from an author that's a favorite of mine. It comes from a filmmaker that's a favorite of mine, and they're both operating along the same sort of wavelength. And so they were like a perfect pair to make Cronenberg was the perfect guy to adapt a J.G. Ballard novel. And I wish that he would have done more, but, yeah, holy fuck.
I bet if he had done High Rise, it would have been good.
Yeah, the one that we got is all right. Yeah. So you want to do some facts here?
I think we must.
Yeah. The year was 1996.
No, sure was.
Year of our Lord. So here were some other movies that were released in 1996. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, Part 2, The Legend of Curly's Gold, came out.
Yeah, because you needed a sequel to that one.
I've never seen it. I do remember when it first came out and it was on the shelves at the video store. I was like, I don't think I want. Like, I appreciate the original, but that's not a movie I go out of my way to watch. You know, so I was like, why the fuck would I want to watch a sequel that is also clearly a craven cash in? You know?
Oh yeah, because the original is very, very subtle satire. And whoever makes a sequel to it is not going to come at it with the same subtlety, I think.
No. Also in 1996, Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood came out that year.
Way to undermine an important film.
It's the same people, the same format as like Scary Movie and shit.
Yeah.
Kazam also came out in 1996, which is the one that everybody calls Shazam and insists it's a movie that never came out. It's one of those Mandela effect things.
Yeah, no, it's actually just racism and bad memory.
Yeah. Oh shit. Also in 96, The Adventures of Pinocchio came out, which
wow, this is a shit year for movies.
It's pretty bad because here's the one that caps the whole shit off. The Stupids came out in 1996.
And I will say, The Adventures of Pinocchio is a deeply upsetting movie.
It certainly is. I feel like we've mentioned it before on the pod, maybe during our peanut butter solution episode.
Probably.
But yeah, like it's really, really fucking weird and upsetting and uncanny.
Yeah, it's like, what happens when CGI isn't quite ready to be rolled out and it goes real bad?
Oh, Jesus Christ, yeah. Fucking 1996. I mean, not a bad year for movies. Scream came out in 1996.
That's true.
So, yeah. We got our cast and crew we've already mentioned. Our director is David Cronenberg, making his second appearance on the pod. We did The Brood previously, but this god of Canada took a real weird turn in the 90s, shifting away from his extremely gory and perverse horror movies toward a series of themes exploring gender and sexuality in ways that were perfectly in line with your expectations of a Cronenberg movie.
Yeah, in the 90s, no less.
Yeah, I mean, it started with Dead Ringers in 88, I think that is, or 87 maybe?
It's 87.
Yeah, which is another one of my favorites of his.
That is a great movie.
But by 1991, he was fully in gear with the Burroughs adaptation Naked Lunch,
which is a disaster of a movie.
I tried to watch it the other night, and I couldn't.
Great soundtrack, though.
Unbelievably good. Yeah, and he followed that up with his adaptation of M. Butterfly, which I've never seen.
I saw it when it came out, I think. It's like 93, maybe.
Yeah.
It is not. It's a drama. So
Right. I mean, it's just a film adaptation of the play.
Well, it's a film adaptation, but they do if I remember correctly, they do the crying game twist at the end, which is not part of the opera, I don't believe.
Which is weird, because by the time that movie came out, like, everybody fucking knew about that.
Well, I think the stage adaptation of it did involve... because B.D. Wong played the role, on stage, and so then it must have then.
Yeah.
But originally, the actual opera on which it is based does not.
Ah, gotcha.
But the play that he is adapting does. So there it is. There's the trajectory.
Yeah, and then this is his last movie of the 90s, and he dropped a fucking.
No, Existence is the last one. This Existence.
I thought Existence was in 2000.
Is it? It's either 99
or 2000. Semantics, who gives a shit? Yeah, it's either this or it's that.
But this is his transition into A History of Violence, and then like all the fucking movies he made with Viggo Mortensen, which I don't really care that much for.
I don't really like those ones either, if I'm being honest. Like, I
think what he's doing is kind of interesting, this exploration of violent men. But I feel like every time, gender and sort of gender expectations and performance are big themes in everything he does, but he's always just a little bit off the mark, and I'm like, oh, come on, you're better than this.
Yeah, I don't think I saw anything after A History of Violence. I just, my problem was they are all way too conventional movies for him, and like, I want like gooey rubber appliances and weird shit. Like, even this movie supplies you with a little bit of that.
Because he's coming at it in a very, he's coming at it in that Cronenbergian way that's just like, all right, we're going to explore some pretty basic themes of, like, humanity, but he's going to do it in a really weird and kind of oblique, extreme way.
Yeah.
It's like a side tackle of gender conversation.
Yep. So our cast includes James Spader, who made a name for himself in the 80s playing rich assholes, psychopaths, and coke fiends.
Yep.
Yep. He's one of those actors that is emblematic of a decade. We got Tough Turf, Wall Street, Less Than Zero, which is really fucking good. Pretty in Pink, Bad Influence. And because this movie is so slick and sterile, he feels very much at home here. But he's also weirdly vulnerable and like strangely sympathetic in this movie.
The acting in this movie is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And then fogging up the screen for a second time on 99-cent rental, we got Elias Koteas.
Well, maybe a little bit less foggy this time around, I'll tell you what.
I don't know. Even in this one, I'm like...
he has an allure to him, but he's pretty mangled in this movie. So
we should have got Eileen to come back for this one. Refer to our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode for that discussion. He is here to chew scenery and kick ass, and he is all out of scenery.
He seems like a very unusual man.
I guarantee he's just a normal dude, but he picks weird characters to play.
He's a great actor. He is extremely compelling in this movie.
I know. I feel bad for like constantly making my like great value De Niro jokes with him because like he really it's not his fault that he kind of looks like Robert De Niro, but he's a fucking fantastic actor.
Yeah, I think he's a better actor than Robert De Niro because Robert De Niro is a giant ham.
And we also got Holly Hunter, an actress who feels way too classed up for podcasts such as this. Yep. But here we are.
I don't know. I mean, Raising Arizona, too. Come on.
Yeah, she came out of the scene like so many others in 1981's The Burning, but immediately moved into more reputable fare, showing up in a couple of Dynamite Coen Brothers movies, Blood Simple, which is outstanding, and also Raising Arizona. Before turning up in basically everything from the mid-'80s to now. She seems to be doing a lot of TV these days. Yep.
She's good, too.
Yeah, fantastic.
She was very excited to be in this movie. I think everybody who's
that is
in
the
this...
thing. At one point, I was like, a point I want to hit on is like, I wanted to look up and see like what the pitching process was like.
There really wasn't much.
There wasn't. Everybody just wanted to be in this fucking movie.
A lot. Like Elias Koteas didn't even. I think Elias Koteas, James Spader, and Holly Hunter didn't even audition for it. He had them in mind for it, or she read it and really wanted it, and he was like, "Okay, but aren't you kind of like highbrow?" Because she had won the Oscar for the piano.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a non-speaking role.
That's the thing is, when you win an Oscar, they immediately go like, hey, what do you want to do next? And everybody having just got that like achievement immediately dives into weirdo passion projects. Like I remember when Roger Avery won for Pulp Fiction, and they were like, hey, what are you going to do next? Like, what's your big plan? He's like, I'm going to make a Phantasm movie. And everybody in Hollywood went, what?
It was like, I want to finish Killing Zoe. And I was like, boo.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah. Honorable mention for Rosanna Arquette, who is doing a lot of Cronenbergian heavy lifting in this movie with her fucking crazy body brace and leg wound.
She is the world-class weirdo of the film. She is the, what's the guy's name? Jan Hartag from The Brood. He's in a bunch of Cronenberg movies. She's that in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that guy. Speaking of Naked Lunch, that guy shows up in that movie, and I was like, fuck yes, it's that dude again.
Yeah, he's in existence, too. He's not in this, unfortunately.
Good. No, he's not. So here's a little trivia about this movie here. This is based on a 1973 novel by J.G. Ballard, which was an extension of a short story from his collection, The Atrocity Exhibition. And according to Ballard himself, he liked the movie better than his own book, of which he was actually quite fond.
I will do you one better. He called this one of the greatest films on sexuality that I've ever seen.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I watched a very, very long conversation between he and Cronenberg, facilitated by someone from The Guardian, and I watched the press conference from Cannes, and he is effusive in his love of this film.
Wow. I don't think, like, he's one of my favorite authors, like, period. Like, I read this book when I got out of rehab, actually, and I had suddenly had a lot of time on my hands. And I read this back to back with, I read Vermilion Sands, I read Cocaine Nights, and then I also read some other fucked up bullshit like the story of O and stuff like that.
So the future was looking bright.
It was probably not the best books to be like reading after getting out of the hospital, but what am I going to do? I was in a weird state of mind. But yeah, like I went on a whole binge. Like I'd been reading his stuff for a while. Like Ballard is a singular mind. Like he gets kind of lumped in with sci-fi authors, and he's got some sci-fi stuff, but the shit that he's best known for is this like insane hyper-fascist capitalist dystopia stuff.
I always kind of lumped him, like in my head, he was always sort of like Cormac McCarthy, Philip K. Dick, but not quite like them, but like in a very different. I've only read a handful of short stories.
That is definitely astute as hell, because that's he's not as intense as Cormac McCarthy, and it's not his shit is like really doom and gloom, but not quite that doom and gloom. And Philip K. Dick, it's like a lot of the sort of less the sort of like future space sci-fi stuff, and more of like the weird shit like A Scanner Darkly, like that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, Ballard kind of also had a tendency to sort of repeat himself a lot. So like he would get hooked on an idea, and then he would write like 3 fucking 500-page novels about like the same idea, and a couple of them read like basically the same. Like Cocaine Nights is really good. There's a book called Super Con, which is basically the same book. His last novel released is something called Kingdom Come, that is essentially those 2 novels plus High Rise. But like his central conceit was like capitalism and consumerism when sort of projected along, like when you sort of project the future of this, like it sort of alienates us in a way that sort of turns us all into savages and fascists and shit. Like everything is about
prescient.
I know it's
except he's also British, so there's that.
Right. And he had a really fucked up childhood. Like he was held in a Japanese internment camp because like his family lived in Shanghai as the like at the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War. And so like his childhood was really savage and fucked up, and he just had a really, really weird outlook on everything. And it produced like there's nothing like these novels. They're very, very unique in a way that like I have a very hard time describing. If you want a piece of it, you want to get a feel for it, read the Atrocity Exhibition, read High Rise, read Crash, because this is actually a pretty good adaptation of the novel. You change a few things, mostly having to do with actors and actresses who are still alive that our sort of sinister character Vaughn sort of fantasizes about running over with his car.
Isn't Elizabeth Taylor?
Elizabeth Taylor
is one of them?
Yeah.
Because he makes some joke during their conversation about how he should have used Elizabeth Taylor, and David Cronenberg was like, she's pretty old though. And he was like, I was joking. Like, oh. 2 very dry people having a hilarious conversation, and neither of them know it.
Yeah. They're talking about the same thing, sort of, but if they've diverged in subtext at some point. The story has been adapted twice before Cronenberg's. The first time was a short by Harley Cokeless, which was adapted from the short in Atrocity Exhibition in 1971. And then once again as a sort of unofficial short in 1987 with Bill Moseley, of all people, playing the part of Vaughn. Yeah, I think that version, it's called Nightmare Angels, and I think it's available on the Arrow version. The Blu-ray of this is like an extra. Oh, okay. Yeah. Cronenberg states in an interview with critic Serge Grunberg from around 2005 that he'd never read Ballard before he made Crash, and I gotta say, I find that incredibly hard to believe.
He said he read half of this book and then was so disturbed by it that he put it down for like years and then came back to finish it.
Because we talked a little bit about this in our Axe episode about The Brood, and that Cronenberg's movies have this like visual language that's consistent with Ballard's Dismal Worlds. And even his movie Shivers is a really low budget monster movie version of Ballard's novel High Rise, which was released the same year as Shivers. But I don't know. Weird. It could just be coincidental, but
they're not unique. They're unusual, perhaps, but they're not unique people. So there is sort of a shared language, I guess.
Yeah, there's a weird compatibility between their approaches to storytelling. They're extremely transgressive. They both have like a singular style that no one has really since attempted to emulate, except for in the case of Cronenberg's children, who seem to be trying to get Dad's attention by making movies like his.
Which is, their movies aren't bad, but I've only seen Possessor. I haven't seen that new one. They're not bad movies, but it's like, these aren't this is not yours. It's sort of like reading Joe Hill, where you're like, oh, well, this is just your father's writing, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is like you're doing a fine job of emulating his writing.
I say, like in Joe Hill's case, I've read several of his books. I like them a lot, but in all of the cases, I'm like, oh, that's two of your dad's novels rolled up into one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ballard also said that this was a cautionary tale.
I read a lot of quotes by Ballard about this, and I don't know how to interpret any of them.
Well, he says it has to be a cautionary tale because otherwise it's a psychotic statement. I can see what he means, though, because the basic framework for this. Well, actually, I think we should step back for a second. So this movie is basically just sort of another way of Cronenberg sort of exploring those themes of isolation and disconnection, but also the intersection with technology and science in a weird way of like how those things are kind of moving us away from one another as people and as sort of human connection. But because I was thinking a lot about this the last couple of days, it's like this movie is extremely 90s, like in a very identifiable way. And in the 90s, it's probably easy to forget that, at that period around when this came out, we went from being like a mostly analog culture to a mostly digital culture in a relatively short amount of time and at a pretty rapid clip.
Major culture shock resulted from it.
And I think for a lot of people, that transition was pretty jarring. And it inspired, I think, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear about what technology and sort of an increasingly digital culture was doing to us, especially when it came to children. Things like video games, the change in taste of music and pop culture. And so it actually made me think a lot about the kind of hand-wringing over AI right now, because a lot of the shit that Cronenberg is or ostensibly afraid of or is kind of building on in this movie and in existence, turned out to be almost naive in a lot of ways. We were like, yeah, none of that happened. It was way worse, though, in a lot of different ways that nobody else saw coming, or that some people saw coming. And it feels a little bit like AI, where everyone's just sort of like freaking out about AI and this sort of alarmist attitude. And then Google rolls out their fucking AI thing, and it's telling you to like eat rocks and kill your neighbor and shit.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a little bit like when I was watching this, I was like, I gotta keep in mind when this came out, because there was a lot of fear kind of floating around about what was happening. And Ballard's story is essentially the same thing. It just takes place in the 70s in London rather than the 90s in Toronto.
Right.
And so there is this feeling of like, this is happening to us. Now, this is a very extreme version of that, and it's a little bit dystopian and a little sci-fi.
Oh, sure. I mean, but that's the Ballard sort of seal is that sort of like extrapolation, like current circumstances kind of extrapolated to a ridiculous degree.
Yeah.
But while reading it, you sort of catch glimmers of like shit that actually does kind of come to pass.
Yes. I think there is some, not hope, because this movie has a pretty bleak ending. Because it's really, it kind of comes down to this group of people that have this sort of, on this kind of death drive in pleasure seeking or in connection seeking, because nothing is satisfying for them. But there is something in there that's very much like, this is happening to us now. If we don't do something, it will end badly for everybody. Yeah. And so there is kind of something cautionary about it, because it's not a foregone conclusion that like we're all just, going to end up in our little digital silos. Now we did, because no one was heeding that cautionary tale. But I do see like where they're just sort of like, this is sort of a gruff man's way of being like, hey, everybody, fucking look at what you're doing. Cut the shit. Watch my movie. This guy's going to have sex with that lady's leg. It's going to be real gross. Yeah. We're all going to freak out about it.
Yep. This movie was awarded the jury prize at Cannes in 1996, which is an award given usually to directors, but has also been awarded to actors and writers for movies presented at the festival that the jury felt are truly original works. It's been given to movies like The Seventh Seal and Slaughterhouse-Five, Aquidon, and Persepolis. Francis Ford Coppola, however, was so incensed by the decision to award it to Crash that he tried to organize a coup against it and ended up losing.
Yeah. Hey, Francis Ford Coppola, stop being such a big fucking baby.
I know.
Hand David Cronenberg that trophy, god damn it.
Yeah, he was scheduled to present the award that year and then refused to do it. He had somebody else physically hand the prize over to Cronenberg.
Now, I'm going to say, because this is the part I actually got a lot into, this whole Cannes thing, but like, I wonder how much of this is manufactured, because this movie was intentionally put on the schedule where it was put by the guy who programmed the whole festival. It was intentionally put in the middle to cause a big stir. He was like, I want to drop a big bomb on the middle of Cannes, and so everyone's going to be talking about it. And Cronenberg was like, well, I don't really get why you think this is such a huge thing. To which I'm like, really? You don't?
He's very coy at times.
Yeah, and it's a little too cute for me sometimes. But I think what he really meant was like, this book has been out for, I don't know, 25 years or whatever. It was a very popular novel when it came out. It was shocking, but it was popular. Like, it's not like people don't know what this is about. When you see it, it's different than reading it, obviously. But there's a lot of that feeling of like manufactured outrage, or the kind of Ebert and Siskel and Ebert kind of outrage where it's like, have you even seen this movie yet? Because there's a lot of people that were like shocked and appalled by it, but it's like, but you haven't even seen it.
Yeah, I know. That's remarkably, Roger Ebert actually liked this movie quite a bit.
A lot of people did.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty well received.
Yeah.
Because it is a very good movie.
Yeah. Cronenberg apparently was, like, it wasn't just Coppola. Like, he was apparently booed on his way to the stage by some people, like, in attendance while he was, like, going to receive the award. And also apparently, like, you know, the usual bullshit happened where people were like leaving the theater in disgust and shit.
Which, I mean, aside from some scenes that I think are intentionally salacious or provocative and like unnecessary, it's pretty tame.
Well, here's the thing. Also, like, everybody likes to act like Cannes is this big, like, art film marketplace where, like, the best of the best go.
It's a fucking trade show.
A lot of porn gets sold at Cannes also, and like a lot of direct-to-video garbage gets sold at Cannes. Like, it's a fucking expo to sell your movie that they kind of drape with this sort of veneer of
gravitas.
Right. I mean, like, and really, like, some really important shit comes out of Cannes, but like, come on.
Yeah, it's not Sundance. It's like it's a pretty old expo. Yeah, I just got the feeling like some of this is David Cronenberg being like, I'm going to put this in here and fuck with people. And then a lot of the other part is sort of like, oh my God, there's so much sex in this movie. And there is, but it's not, I mean,
it's not extremely explicit.
Nice to watch.
No, there's a couple of moments where I was like, oh wow. Okay. So, okay. There's a thing that's happening, but yeah.
But I mean, even he said, the point of all the sex in this movie is to show how disconnected they are, and you really do get that feeling because this is not lovemaking in films. This is not erotic sex.
No.
It's difficult and awkward, and it's fucking, and it's his position, Cronenberg's position was, we have reached a point where sex is no longer necessary for procreation. You don't need to do that in order to have children. It's probably the easiest way, but he was like, that you can't argue that that's its real purpose anymore. And so what then does it become if we also are not really connected to one another? And so we're just sort of pleasure seeking, but we're also taking out the pleasure part of it. So you're just constantly chasing this high.
Yeah.
And that's sort of his interpretation of this.
Yeah. Also, and I'm going to talk about the NC-17 a little bit in the run up to the actual plot, but
which always fucks a movie over.
But not necessarily in this case. To the point that you said that it almost feels like a bit of a setup for the film festival. This comes the year after Showgirls came out, which got the NC-17, which Paul Verhoeven was like very pleased with because they floated their entire marketing campaign on that.
And he's a real sassy fella, Paul.
He's a dude. He's a dude whose sense of humor I really appreciate.
Yep.
But yeah, like it was almost like that movie came out and wore that rating proudly, and it kind of took the teeth away from it because like this is there are a million fucking theaters in this country that would not usually book NC-17 movies, and then all of a sudden they started to. So, you know, in a way, I kind of feel like it's a statement on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, but I think what happens with that is, I wasn't thinking of it from a practical perspective. I was thinking of it more from the controversy that starts to swirl around it, because it becomes a whole thing. Now, I think Verhoeven used it to their advantage, which is kind of brilliant. But in this case, it becomes a whole thing of like, it's too sexually aggressive, or it's just like everybody focuses on that part, and they miss the whole point of why all of the sex is there to begin with, because it does push his point of this is not just not sexy. This is not erotic, film. You should be a little put off by this stuff because it feels so detached. And unfortunately, it becomes like, oh, you've basically just made kind of a sci-fi porno.
Yeah.
Because people make a lot of assumptions. Now, in Showgirls, they made the right assumptions. It just happened to be that was kind of what people wanted. In this, they make a very wrong assumption that it is about the sex. And it's like, it's not. It's about why the sex isn't doing it in the movie or for these characters anymore.
Right.
And you miss the whole point because it's like, oh, you get this label slapped on you now because you've made something that is titillating and provocative. And it's like, well, it's yes, but not for the reason you think, and now you're never going to know that.
Yeah. So Cronenberg's agent at the time was so convinced that this movie was going to ruin his career that he begged him not to take the project on and instead presented an alternative, some of that courtroom bullshit that was all the rage in the 90s called The Juror, which
did come out eventually.
Yeah, which also, it reminds me, did you ever watch 30 Rock?
A little bit.
There's a season where like Jenna goes off.
The Verger.
The Verger. That's all I could think of when I saw this. But yeah, Cronenberg not only made this movie, but he then fired his agent.
Well, though he does still speak very highly of him. He was like, he just didn't really understand what I was doing, and he didn't understand. Because there's a book called Cronenberg on Cronenberg.
Yeah.
And I read the whole section on this. And he was basically like, he was a really nice guy, really great agent. He just didn't get the direction I was going in. And we were coming from very different places. So he was kind of like, I like him very much. I understand his concern. It just wasn't working out anymore. It's like an amicable divorce.
But if somebody came to me, David Cronenberg, and was like, here's your, this is going to be your A Few Good Men, I'd be like, get the fuck away from me.
Like, yeah, it's a new company. They're called Pixar.
Yeah. In the UK, the Daily Mail, which can fuck off with its sensational bullshit.
You're fucking disgusting rag.
Yeah, led a movement to have the movie banned from English theaters, and the British Board of Film Censors put it through the paces to see if they could carry it out, trying to classify it as obscene, but failing the criteria, passing it before psychologists to see if any one of them would tell them that the public was at risk from copycats. And
Spoiler, they didn't.
And lastly, against a panel of disabled people to see if they were at least offended by it, and nobody budged.
Nope. See, I think this is all very telling. So the Daily Mail's campaign, their big tagline was "Morality dies in the twisted wreckage," which I have to admit, as far as sensational headlines go, is pretty good. But I think you get this a lot when you have well-meaning, sort of privileged people, whether there are white people advocating on behalf of black people or straight people advocating on behalf of gay people. They make a lot of assumptions. And I think this is a very good example of how that can backfire when it's like, well, obviously disabled people must be outraged by it. And disabled people are kind of like, why would you think that?
I don't know. Like, hey, maybe I'd like somebody to lick my leg wound.
Yeah. Like, it's very like, oh, well, you must be disgusted by this. And it's like, no, I think you just want me to be so you can be disgusted by this.
Yeah, it's all just...
Which also says a lot about what you think of disabled people.
Yeah, it's just fucking, it's just stock bad faith arguments,
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of like intellectual dishonesty and, all that kind of moral outrage. Clive Barker... He said that he thought a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was a campaign year in the UK.
Oh, all right.
And there was a lot of conservative campaigns kind of at the time were focused on morality and family and all that stupid bullshit.
They fucking always are.
And so they kind of were like, they latched onto this. God, this shit is so transparent. And yet it fucking works every time because people are generally selfish and stupid. So. Case in point, America right now.
Right. Speaking of conservative panic and pearl clutching, Ted Turner, owner of the film's U.S. distributor Fine Line Feature, was so personally offended by the movie, like the assholes at the British Board of Film Censors, he thought that there would be copycats because of this movie and refused to have the movie like shown, and so he had it pulled from the company's release schedule. So it was released in Canada on time in the autumn of 1996, but was eventually released in the U.S. In the spring of '97 after like a lot of fighting and like lawsuits and shit.
So fucking stupid.
I know.
Because honestly, watching this now today, I can understand what people saw and why some of them were upset about it. But it really is, it's not that aggressive a film. I think if you have some self-awareness and watch it with a little bit of information about the movie, you can kind of go, all right, I don't think that needed to be here, but...
You know what I think? And I'll talk about it when we get there, because really it's 2 points, I think, that really stick out that I think really triggered people in this area. one, there's a gay scene, and two, gay-ish, sure, but still, can you point to any other like major distribution, like movie and major distribution that had something like this in it at that time?
Yes, but that's not the point.
But also, there's also a lot of scenes of women experiencing pleasure, which has always tripped alarms with censors.
I would actually argue that they're not experiencing pleasure. That's kind of the point. And I think maybe that's what threw people off. But that is what maybe threw people off so much. And of course there's that whole argument about like, oh, we're totally fine watching people get blown apart left and right. But as soon as two people are having sex on a screen, we fucking freak out. But the fact that like, this is not the sex that you were expecting. In some ways, it's sex you don't want to watch. In a lot of ways, it's sex you don't want to watch.
Because also, the 90s was like the high age of the erotic thriller. And this is the antithesis of that.
Yes. That is why this movie feels so 90s to me. Is like, oh, this is Gen X sexuality writ large on the fucking screen.
Yeah.
Brought to life in the most extreme way. This is the sexual liberation. This is gay rights movement. Like, this is all of this stuff distilled down and then kind of thrown back in our faces with the question of, where did it get you? How do you feel now? And it's sort of like, that's a really hard thing to be confronted with. Now, I'm sure most people would be like, no, my sex life is fine. I don't want to crash cars and fuck some lady's leg. But I think the fact remains that it is saying, we've all been pursuing this to some uncertain end, and it doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere because we're just moving farther away from each other.
Yeah.
And I think that is a hard thing to put in someone's face and say, now watch it happen over and over again, because there are scenes of fucking in this that are followed by scenes of fucking that are followed by scenes of fucking.
I know.
The movie opens with 2 sex scenes back to back, and they're both uncomfortable.
Yeah, you're going to hear me say, and then they fuck like 1,000 fucking times in this podcast. All right, I want to take a brief detour real quick here because we talk about video store a lot, the sort of video store experience with this pod in particular. Because of the video store situation in the 90s, it was way different than the one that we sort of romanticize here with our kind of nostalgia shit. In the 90s, massive chains, specifically Blockbuster, had kind of strangled the market in a way that it makes it sort of like there is a very clear generational divide in the way that people sort of experience video stores. And so like I see a lot of people get really nostalgic about like Friday night at Blockbuster and shit,
which
like
I don't
that.
understand, because we didn't have a Blockbuster. Actually, I think eventually we did.
We did eventually, but like I never had the same sort of experience of joy going there.
Yeah, it feels very much like looking at Netflix.
Yeah. So what do you know about the sort of sordid details of Blockbuster's operating model?
Not very little, just from what I know from watching that documentary.
So I
know that they kind of like took the Walmart approach where they just crushed everything or bought it out.
Yeah. So what they did was, I mean, not just that, but in terms of the videos that were on their shelves. So they would not stock anything that was rated NC-17. And because they were such a force in the marketplace in the 90s, movies had to get cut down to at least an R rating to appear on their shelves. And this could sort of like make or break your home video market strategy. So most studios just caved. And so like Crash was no different. It appeared on Blockbuster stores, but it was cut down to an R rating. I have no idea what that movie looks like.
Is it like an hour long? If that?
Jesus Christ.
Is it like the hilarious Showgirls? Already cut? Because, hey, everybody, if you haven't seen that movie, go find it. It is fucking hilarious.
Yeah. So they obviously and very famously didn't stock porn, which big fucking deal. Plenty of mom and pop stores opted out of porn as well. Routine rentals like eclipse the rate of porno rentals in most markets. But Blockbuster, like I said, they wouldn't do it. They cut everything down to an R, and even in some southern markets, like religious groups pressured them to even get rid of R-rated tapes. Boo. Which is wild.
Boo, religious groups. Boo.
Which is crazy because this is in the 90s, which is coming on an entire decade of like violent R-rated action movies that are just insane fascist fantasies. Yeah.
Rambo.
Fucking Cobra.
Well,
Invasion USA.
Yeah.
Right. What many people don't know is that because of Blockbuster's dominance in the 90s, there were often like blockbuster cuts of movies. Mm-hmm. So studios would sometimes just nip the controversy in the bud and not only edit for the MPAA, but they also did a sort of content ratio that wouldn't upset the buyers at Blockbuster. They just got ahead of that shit. Blockbuster even went back on old movies and cut them for the Blockbuster marketplace. Famously, when the Tarantino effect took over in the 90s and video stores were suddenly stocking like grindy action movies and blaxploitation movies, Blockbuster had any scene removed from Shaft that suggested that he was having sex with a white woman.
Now, that would be very hard because Shaft has sex with a lot of white women. Not when Shaft goes to Africa.
No one understands him but his woman.
That's true.
Yeah. But like the Blockbuster.
Also, that is racist as hell.
Yes, it is. Unsurprisingly, owned by a conservative Christian, sort of for like the bulk of its like high times before he sold it off. Back to
Christians, just stick to your own shitty movies. God knows there's enough of them.
I know. Just refer to everything on god awful movies.
Yes, do.
So yeah, and lastly, before we really move forward with this, the paraphilia in question here is called symphorophilia, which is an arousal stemming from witnessing a disaster as large as a tornado or as small as a car accident.
Also, there is no evidence that this is real.
I know. This is like fucking like that shit that appears on Urban Dictionary that sex acts that clearly nobody has ever engaged in. They're just fucking funny.
There is something to be said about like pushing the boundaries to an outrageous limit.
Yeah, unlike Urban Dictionary, this was actually coined in the American Journal of Psychotherapy in 1984 by a guy named John Money. J Money.
Yeah. Creflo Dollar.
Yep. Do you have any reviews?
Oh boy. So I had hoped to find some of the more outraged and scandalized ones, but there weren't that many of them. So there's here's a good one. On its scandalizing surface, David Cronenberg's Crash suggests exploitation at its most disturbingly sick. At the very least, it is quite literally a striking oddity. That is from the New York Times, who they were sort of like, it's fine, I guess. Let's see. Guaranteed to offend. Crash is quintessential Cronenberg, quite romantic beneath its glacial surfaces. Crash is, in its terminal way, a love story, a stifled scream against entropy, which I think is actually a pretty eloquent way of describing the movie, because that is exactly what it is.
Yeah, it is. It's people trying to find connection, and all they find is death.
Yep. The Los Angeles Times did not care for this one. It says, remember that for a canny marketing department, controversial is the latest refuge of the tedious, which, oh, shut up. He's not wrong, but come on. Kicks may be getting harder to find, but Crash is not a great place to look for new ones. Well, Kenneth Turan, I think you're wrong. Chicago Tribune really liked it. Most people really liked it because it is a very good
movie. That's the thing.
It's got some dumb shit in it, but
here's the thing. I'm gonna say this. This is a top 3 Cronenberg movie for me.
I would not put it in my top 3, but I do really like it. I do think it's quite good.
Yeah, it's Videodrome, Dead Ringers, and this for me. And then
wow.
Yeah. And then Scanners and, The Fly and shit like that after that. But I think that this movie is just ballsy and weird and crazy and fucked up. It rings all those bells in this kind of diabolical side of me that I never let out because it's bad when I do. So it's a little treat for that guy,
I don't think so my top 3 are The Brood, Rabid, and then probably Videodrome.
All right. See, you're an old school.
I like the older ones. I like the ones where he's really just I'm gonna put real weird, gross, sexy stuff in this, and it's all gonna be really Canadian. But I think why I don't hold this one there is that this is it's a little bit muddled in the message. I think he's almost got it, but he's sort of just it doesn't come out quite as well.
I am with you. It suffers from a quality that a lot of his movies do, where you can tell that he has almost has the fully conceived idea in place, but it's just not quite there. The whole thing is just a little undercooked. Which
I will give him credit, though, because I think what he is grappling with, whether it's this or The Brood or Rabid, and he often comes off pretty misogynistic but he's also a man in the 70s, so whatever. But I think that we give him credit because these are concepts that we understand very well now. Well, actually, some of us understand very well now. They're sort of deceptively simple in that they're very straightforward questions about humanity and about connection to other people and about emotions. But they are also at the same time profoundly complicated things because they are about emotions and connections to other people. And so he is grappling with them at a time when most people just preferred to ignore them. So when he sort of misfires, I think he often does in The Brood, I think that movie comes across more misogynistic than most for obvious reasons. But here it's the same thing. It's you are, I think, where a lot of other people are in the late 90s, especially, in terms of academia or more liberal or progressive people. They're starting to understand something about themselves or about culture, or Western culture at least. And I think so when he's not there, not many people were. And so he is still quite progressive. Even if he's not really hitting it directly, he's a lot further along than most people were or even are now.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing is I'm so tempted to use the phrase avant-garde with him. But his stuff's not really avant-garde in the way that you expect it to. But he is in the sense that he is thinking way the fuck out front.
I think it's cerebral.
Yeah, this is extremely sophisticated shit.
Yeah,
it just so happens that he couldn't help himself but make everything really bloody and squicky and gross, and so it also appeals to the dumbass horror movie fan in me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But that, as a fucking brand, man, that you have taken these really sophisticated, concepts and put them forward and put your own stamp on it And it is not only a smart and thoughtful movie as far as you can be in 1996, but it's still fucking gross and super confrontational. And I love the shit out of that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it is a top 3. I don't know. I've just been like, oh my God, I love this movie.
Yeah, we're going to talk this through and we'll see where you end up at the end of the chat. So let's do it. Let's get into this shit. So we open on a crowded hangar full of airplanes.
I would actually say before we open there, we open on the most 90s credits you've ever seen.
Oh my God,
like
dude.
The kind of shit you made in computer class.
I was going to say
the
same thing. It's like 3D Studio Max and like Print Shot Pro.
With Howard Shore's fucking jangly, jarring score. We haven't even talked about the score in this movie. It is really off-putting.
It's dissonant and cold, and it's not what you expect whatsoever. It's basically Howard Shore into guitar, and that's it.
And he kind of ramps it up towards the end. I think he pulls it off pretty well. It's not fun to listen to. I have it. It's not a fun listen.
I could not imagine putting this on without it accompanying the movie.
It's got some high points, but yeah, it's pretty aggressive in your head. So then we get to the people fucking in the hangar.
Yeah, so airplane hangar crowded with airplanes. A beautiful blonde woman begins undressing, pressing her boobs to the fuselage of a nearby airplane, when from out of nowhere, here comes some dude behind her, lifting up her skirt, and then busily getting down to eat the booty like groceries.
Seriously?
Oh, shit. I'm so glad I got to use that phrase. Yeah. Oh, boy, we are off to the fucking races.
This is like five seconds into the fucking
That's
movie.
the thing. I don't know. There's like this like middle school part of me that has been giggling behind my eyes for like the last week watching, like processing.
Because the sex in this movie is so awkward all the time. And he said he did that on purpose.
I don't know.
Because it's supposed to be really, he wants them to all feel very like disconnected from each other. And it's like, yeah, I get that sometimes, but other times it's just like, this is just super awkward. Because this guy has got like, he's got his face in her ass, basically.
Yep. So elsewhere in this gray Canadian city,
meanwhile, on another porn set across town,
James Ballard, TV or film producer. So yeah, that's the thing is Ballard kind of wrote himself into this story, into the book, and I believe James Ballard in the novel is a writer. But here, Cronenberg clearly kind of understood what was going on, and he makes him a filmmaker.
Someone asked him in that press conference, like, why didn't you just call him Cronenberg? And he was like, I think that would have been a little too on the nose.
Yeah. So this guy here, James Ballard, busily banging his coworker in a room adjacent to the set that he's working on while everybody sets up their next shot.
Yep.
Yep. And then he and the blonde lady from the airport, his wife, Catherine, dreamily but dispassionately talk about their exploits today, having some sort of open marriage arrangement where, and then they have sex, which is a phrase you should probably get used to me saying.
And they're having this conversation out on their balcony of their apartment in this like big sort of tall high rise. And at first, I was like, Jesus, why do they make Toronto look like the whole thing looks like a fucking airport? Like,
I know. That's the thing is, like, I've been to Toronto, and it's a fairly colorful city, but
that is on purpose, and it is extremely smart. Like, they don't even live in, like, they're so remote even in where they live.
Yeah.
They're not connected to a vibrant city because all the places they go in this movie, they're all like warehouses and abandoned buildings and airplane hangars. It's like they're never in a downtown area. They're always on the outskirts of the city as though they are not a part of this city at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which that is so fucking smart.
Again, going back to our Brood discussion where we talked about that as well, there is a sort of brutalism to the architecture of the movie. And it's got to be something Cronenberg himself is just personally in love with because it is a bold fucking statement.
Yeah.
No. And so there's a phrase that he says, I think he asks her if she came and she's like, nope. And he says, maybe next time. So just like put a little pin in that. Remember that. The big takeaway here is that neither of them are really getting off on any of this, and they seem to be chasing some high that they just cannot reach. So later that night, while driving and trying to read storyboard notes at the same time,
just doing a little driving and reading, you know,
Yep.
a little reckless by any measure.
Yeah. Ballard's car suddenly plunges down an embankment, crosses the median into oncoming traffic. He swerves, avoiding numerous cars until he hits one head on, and the passenger flies through his windshield, landing dead in Ballard's passenger seat.
This scene is so fucking aggressive.
It is. It's like a cannonball fires into his car. We see a quick flash of his hand, which bears the thick bloodless scar in a conspicuous shape that matches the hood ornament of Ballard's car.
There's so a lot of people asked him, like, why did you show, because there's a lot of car crashes in this movie, not surprisingly. And every time people were like, well, why didn't you show them like they really are? And he was like, what do you mean like they really are? And they were like everything happened so fast. Like, why didn't you slow things down? And like, and he was just like, I don't know what kind of car crashes you've been in, but they don't happen that way. Like, he was like, I wanted these to be exactly like they are. I wanted them to be surprising. Oh yeah. You have no disorienting. Like, it all happens in a second and then it's over and you have no idea what just happened, but you're bleeding.
Yeah. Like I rolled over in a car once, and like it was just like in this fucking movie where all of a sudden like the car just went back over onto its wheels, and I'm sitting there holding the fucking steering wheel, going like, holy shit, what the fuck was that? And then I got out of the car and was like, oh my God, I just rolled over in this thing.
Yeah, if you've never been in a car accident or been like struck by a vehicle, it is a singular experience. It is indescribably strange.
Yeah, I think what people are expecting Hollywood shit with movies. Like, they want to see it from several angles and in slow-mo and stuff like that. But like, no, that's not the fucking point. Like, the point is like, I want to hit you in the fucking face with this car accident, so it's got to be realistic and brutal and hard. Like, That is
the most disorienting thing I have ever experienced, and it is rough.
Yeah.
And then, of course, just across the way, Holly Hunter is the guy's wife, the guy who just rocketed into his car. She is similarly dazed in her car, so she whips her tits out.
Well, what she does is she goes to like she's roughly like pulls the seatbelt off of her, right, but also rips her blouse open. And so she's just like naked underneath this. Yeah.
Which we will find out why that is, but like it's still a little bit odd because you're like, this is Holly Hunter though, like Oscar winner Holly Hunter.
I don't know. She was in the piano.
I mean, it's sort of like, like when an Oscar nominee says, I'm your girlfriend now, Billy. And you're like, no, you're not. Don't do that. Don't debase yourself.
Yeah. So at the hospital in the city, Ballard is in recovery with a very David Cronenberg medical apparatus, which keeps his leg in traction.
Now, did you notice that he has the impression on his chest is the steering wheel, the emblem on the steering wheel?
Yes.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
My note says he's like a car now.
Very, very observant. So stainless steel rods like pierce his skin in several places, like presumably holding the bone in place while it heals. Like, it is very much at home in a David Cronenberg movie. Yeah. Like, I don't know if they actually use something like that.
They do.
Ah, all right. Catherine now visits James. They talk about the survivor of the other wreck, Dr. Helen Remington, who is...
Because they don't say that his name... I don't know if you ever find out what his last name is in the movie. They must at some point. But he's just James. And so at one point you get a look at his hospital bracelet and it says J.G. Ballard on it.
Ah, they did the thing.
And it's sort of just like, you said the name of the movie. It's that kind of thing where you're like, just in case you didn't get it, everybody.
Yeah.
Also, this is where everybody starts whispering. The dialogue in this movie is so quiet that I kept having to like turn it up and then the music would kick in and I'd have to turn it down.
I know, it's like a fucking Pixies song.
Yeah. Oh, it's rough.
They talk about the survivor, Helen Remington, who is supposedly in the hospital with James somewhere. The hospital is remarkably empty and silent. Like, as far as we know,
it's like where they live. It's like all the locations they go to. They're very sparsely populated. Like, Toronto is a major city. It is full of people. It is full of color and culture and life. And yet everywhere they go is bleak and empty.
Oh, yeah. If you're making a movie and you don't want to have to pay New York taxes, you go to Toronto and you just pretend you're in Manhattan.
But it works so well for this because the whole point is that all of the people in this movie are losing connections to everybody else. So everywhere they go, they're just sort of alone there.
Yeah, it's just like endless expanses of highways and like parking garages and
all whispering at one another.
Yeah. So Ballard is later up and walking around by doctor's orders, or at least trying to, on that horrible brace that he's wearing, when around the corner comes Helen Remington, the driver of the other car, also walking on a cane with some difficulty.
He's also smoking very heavily in the hospital.
Right. Ballard tries to talk to her, but she suddenly steals up and walks away on her own quite fine. She's accompanied by a pale and badly scarred man in a lab coat who takes a very serious, very horny interest, you might say.
Yes. Looks like he's going to kiss him.
In Ballard's injuries. Now, back in the hospital room, Catherine soaps up her hands, gives Ballard a hand job while describing the wreckage of the other car in great, great detail.
And yet he's still kind of like, ugh, not now.
Seemingly alarmed by how much he's enjoying the situation. Ballard stops her and then laments that he didn't go to the dead man's funeral. So, yeah. Some weeks later, his leg healed and the gashes on his body now scars. Ballard goes home, sits on the balcony with binoculars, watching the congested traffic pattern of the highway nearby.
And this is the first of several times that someone will remark about how there is more traffic. It seems like there's more cars now.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I tried to sort of like put that through the paces and sort of understand what that's all about.
So the cars, as far as I could tell from what I read and mostly read from Cronenberg, is that it's the way he understands cars, because cars are very much a metaphor for him in this. He's also a big fan of just, I think, vehicles in general.
Yeah.
But so the way he kind of explains it is that cars are one of the things that are disconnecting us, because, you know, we used to walk places and you'd be on the sidewalk passing other people, or you'd take public transportation where you were constantly sort of surrounded by other people. But in a car, you are alone. It is basically like you are driving your house somewhere. It's why the Elias Koteas character, the Vaughn character, lives in his car. It's just like you are surrounded by it. You're encased in this thing. You're separate from everybody else, and you can do what you would do else. For the most part, you can do what you like. That's why they're having sex in cars.
Yeah.
Because he sort of sees it that way. There's a great quote. I'll see if I can find it in my notes, because it was... it's kind of interesting. So he says about the cars, because one of the questions they ask is like, can you ever envision a world without cars? And he says, our attachment to it, as discussed in the movie, is very primitive indeed. It has become the quintessential human appendage. I think it won't go away easily. It's got a lot of shape shifting to do before it disappears. And I think this is sort of a cool way to envision cars as a sort of part, like an extension of people. But to him, it's this way of further isolating ourselves from, the rest of the world around us.
Right. Because in the 1950s, really post World War II, as that sort of like cars became very, not inexpensive, but more affordable, and there were more cars very suddenly. This is not unique to the United States, but it's sort of instrumental and quintessential to the United States. Yeah,
what you were about to say.
Right. What it came to be is sort of the way that they were sold was a symbol of freedom. Yeah. Now you can go anywhere. Places that you were not able to reach before are suddenly within grasp. So but
the key there is that you can do it on your own.
Yeah.
And that, I think that is sort of why this keeps coming up, is it seems like people are increasingly alone on the road, even though they are right next to each other all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas on a bus, you're literally pressed up against, as someone who rode a bus and a train every day for many years, you are literally smooshed up against people. This is sort of like, it seems like more and more people are separate out there together.
Yeah.
That's sort of my interpretation of that phrase, because it comes up a couple more times.
Yeah.
From different characters.
Yeah. So now, left on his own, Ballard goes out into the city, visiting his empty parking spot in whatever garage he parked at. And then he later...
wearing a cable knit sweater underneath a blazer, which is a very bold look.
He must have been so warm.
Very warm.
Yeah. And so he goes and he finds the wreckage of his car in the police impound lot, sitting in the driver's seat. He looks down, finds a stack of porn, book called A Fistful of Bimbos.
Fistful of Bimbos. And the woman on the cover of that magazine, man, she's seen better days.
I would definitely describe this woman as a bimbo. And then there's also like Polaroids of a woman undressing in the footwell of the passenger seat.
And so I think I couldn't decide how I felt about this because we never really learn. If we learn about anybody, we learn the most about James and his wife.
Yeah.
But we don't ever really get much about anybody else. And I'm not sure how I feel about that.
No, well, Vaughn in particular is supposed to be a cipher. Like, you're never supposed to really understand this guy. Which
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially at the end.
Right, because he is the most gone out of all of them, right? Yeah. But a little bit more on Remington would have been welcome, just to sort of get her, because she's also coming into this world along the same vector as Ballard. Like, it's almost like her husband was the guy who was looking for that death experience, and she was the one who's kind of like Catherine in the situation right now, where she's just like a passenger along for a ride that until she has a crash of her own, she can never really understand it. And for Helen Remington, that was her moment. And so here she goes. She's a little more familiar with this world than Ballard, but just not much.
And I'll bring this up again because I think it's more important a little bit later when you sort of meet the rest of them.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand the stakes of it.
I can't wait. I'll wait till we get there because the way that they are presented is very upsetting to me.
Yes, because they seem like a bunch of psychopaths.
Junkies is
so like hollow-eyed psychopaths.
They're so let's put a pin in that one.
Yeah.
So at the same time as this is happening, Helen Remington, now also healed up, is in the yard looking for her car.
I mean, what are the odds?
I
show up at the impound lot at the same time.
This is a David Cronenberg meet cute. And they share.
However, this is a really cool moment because they do sort of get in the car together. But the way that because he gets in the car, right?
Yes.
Because they have sex in the car here.
Yeah. So he offers her a ride. And they're driving along, and that's when he's like, you haven't really told me where we're going. And she's like, oh, I haven't. But then they have these weird moments because this is a setup for a sex scene. And so he's trying to kind of like signal to you in the traditional ways that it's like, we're going to do something sexy here. So it's like, her kind of crossed legs and these like tights and this dress that she's wearing.
But the way it's shot is so incredible because you're seeing her through the other side of the window or through the mirrors, and the way the camera is like mounted on the car is just a little bit off kilter.
Yes, so it
is so cool.
You experience this sort of traditional Hollywood setup for a sex scene, but through the medium of the car, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, super cool.
Yep. So there's a car sort of like lurches into traffic, which causes them to go spinning out and shit like that. And they have that kind of like, that excitement for a moment. And then she's like,
because I thought James Spader should not be driving anymore.
I know, but they both grab the fucking wheel and they're like, left, now right, now left. It's like, guys, decide on a direction.
Look, pump the brakes, y'all, in every possible way.
Yeah. Also, she remarks that the car that they're riding in is the exact same car that he crashed, which is significant.
Yep. Then they have sex. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, they have another banal conversation about the volume of traffic, and then they fuck at the park at the airport. But they do it urgently, while pedestrians and cars just kind of casually pass around them. And then both of them seem to finish very quickly, but also, most importantly, satisfactorily, in a way that Ballard has not in the film up to this point, as illustrated by the sort of sleepy and bored way that he and his wife kind of go about it.
And I think if you have a character who is supposed to sort of be sleepwalking through his life in this way, James Spader is the best fucking pick because he has just got this look on his face, this kind of like dopey, fucked up look that he always has. And he's a very good looking man. Well, he was. I guess he's not quite so much anymore. But he is like peak Spader. Well, 80s is peak Spader. But he looks great in this. But he just is glassy. And they all kind of are. But like, you could not have picked a better person. Mm-hmm. He's just sort of like constantly looks a little like he's bored and uninterested in whatever's happening around him, and he's just sort of floating along.
Yeah. Back at home, Catherine and Ballard fuck, but it's a juxtaposition of the scene we just watched. They seem to struggle. Neither of them are terribly into what they're doing until they just sort of call it quits.
Also, they're never facing each other in any of the sex
scenes. In that scene, they are.
Are they?
Yeah, she's
because
like,
he says that he intentionally went out of his way so that they wouldn't. Whenever anyone's having sex, they're not really facing each other.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the scene with Helen and him, they are, but that's also kind of the point. This is a sort of intense moment of connection between them, shared around a sort of very unique experience that like nobody else can have. So yeah, I can understand that. But the scene that kind of follows that is just be like, back at home, he's trying to get a little of that spark with his own wife, and it's just not happening. So now we cut to a stretch of lonely road somewhere else in the city. The pale, scarred man from the hospital, now in coveralls, erotically traces the curves of a replica Porsche Spyder with one hand while he speaks into a microphone with the other hand, recounting the death of James Dean.
This scene is amazing.
It's amazing, yeah. So James Dean was an experienced race driver, killed at the age of 24 on September 30th, 1955, when his Spyder, a very small, low-profile car, collided head-on with a Ford Tudor, a much larger vehicle. The driver, having not seen Dean's little car as it approached, the impact was so intense that the Spyder cartwheeled across the road 3 times before settling into a roadside ditch.
And the driver of that other car, Donald Turnipseed.
Donald Turnipseed.
Donald Turnipseed is his real name.
Yep. Dean died on the scene of a broken neck, while the driver of the Tudor was dazed but uninjured.
Interestingly, though, he died like 10 years later in a car accident.
Yep. Also, the passenger in Dean's car was badly injured, but he survived. Also killed in a car accident like 20 years later. Fucking crazy, man. Curse. It's a curse.
Well, I mean, he's also driving a box of crackers around at high speed.
I know. So. When you see the two cars like compared, it's like, oh my god, this little thing, like your head was like chin to the top of your head was above the windshield.
Yeah.
So,
it's like setting a Casio keyboard down next to a grand piano, being like they're basically the same, right?
Yeah. Bearing all this in mind, the gentleman, played by our guy, Elias Koteas, is a dude named Vaughn, and he's presenting the story and a reenactment of the accident to an audience of spectators, among whom are Helen and Ballard.
Now, I wonder what this... So, obviously, this performance, it feels like a metaphor for something. For what they're doing, because it's an illegal thing that they're doing, is the cops show up and sort of chase them away. And it feels a little bit to me like a metaphor for sort of the underground activities that were very popular, like rave culture and shit like that.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's mostly harmless, but sort of nonetheless illegal and constantly gets busted.
Well, this scene actually happens in the novel, but when I watch this, it reminds me of an old sort of performance art group from the 90s called Survival Research Labs, who used to build essentially death machines, like really, really dangerous robots out of like animal bones and steel, and but they were engineered to do really fucked up things like destroy another robot or wreck a car. They built the one that I saw that they did in
it's like low key Burning Man shit.
Kind of. The one that they did in Boston was they built this telepresence machine that fired a telephone pole at like extremely high velocities. Like it was crazy. Like somebody in Chicago was controlling this thing over the internet, and there was like industrial music and fire and shit. Like it was nuts. And so I very much reminded of this.
So I say that because one of the impressions that I get from David Cronenberg is that, and this comes across in this movie, is that because he is a boomer, and I don't want to make this an ageist thing, but like, there is a little bit of like almost hysteria in the way he talks about certain things, where he's like, well, I saw middle-class people getting tattoos and nose piercings. And there's a little bit of pearl clutching to it that I'm kind of like, really?
I know.
You made The Fly, man. You made that movie where the fucking snake thing comes out of that lady's armpit. Like, you're shocked by all this? And so there's a little bit of like, And now they're doing this. Can you believe it? Kids these days. It kind of has, it's a little bit like Stephen King in that way where it's like, and hey, look, I'm liberal and live and let live, but really tattoos? Like it has that kind of vibe. And so watching this car crash scene, this reenactment, it has that feeling of like, they're doing something, really exciting and sort of underground activities that because the cops show up and sort of chase everybody off, and Vaughn says they don't know who we are.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I would love to go to just such an event. Like this was this sort of weird, crazy bullshit that really captivates my imagination.
I would, but I don't want to watch people get hurt for real. And the people in this movie do get hurt for real. Like that is something that happens in this reenactment.
Yeah. So Vaughn, in great detail, describes the crash, setting the tone for what you're about to see. Two stunt drivers will drive at one another and collide, with Vaughn in the passenger seat of the Spider, as was Dean's racing mechanic, Rolf Vuterick. And then they smash into each other. Yep. And then there's some positively sexy photography of the wreckage as like fluid pour out of the cars and like steam condenses on the chrome and shit. Yeah. So Vaughn,
this movie is beautifully shot.
Yeah.
Same guy who's I think most of his movies.
So Vaughn, not badly hurt, peels himself out of the car and continues with his monologue as we see that his driver is hurt pretty badly. As the cops break the show up, Vaughn helps the driver escape into the woods while the spectators break off and run away. And then Helen and Ballard follow Vaughn and his driver Seagrave into the woods. And so in Vaughn's car now, a massive Lincoln convertible stuffed with police scanners and radio equipment, he reflects on his performance and reaches between Helen's legs as they drive away.
Don't like it. I'm going to like it a lot less later.
So back at Vaughn's place, there's two more weirdos hanging around, and the scene is less a performance spectacular and more like a junkie flophouse.
Yeah, it's like I have been in some real fucking rough, bad places, and this feels like that.
This is like probably why I find it so upsetting is I've been in locations like this.
Yeah.
And it's every bit as like desperate and weird and anxious and shit. Cause like a moment ago, like Vaughn is like performing and flying high, and now he's like twitchy, and he's surrounded by people who all seem to have this kind of like shared experience that kind of looks like they're all heroin addicts, but they're not. They're just sort of like,
these are the ones that I would like to have known a little bit more, because the implication here is that this is a kind of cult.
Yes.
Very informal, but a cult nonetheless. And why people join cults is usually for the same reason. Like why they join cults in general is kind of for the same reasons. It's not that hard to understand. Why people join a specific cult is very unique. And I want to know, why did these people, and I think what is sort of conveyed is like they've all been in these kind of car accidents. Obviously the Rosanna Arquette, she's fucking messed up.
Yeah.
But like so the implication there is like, well, they've all sort of had this experience, and now they're all chasing this high together. But I just would have liked a little bit more about that, because I think it would have made certain things to come a little bit more effective.
Yeah, I'll give you that for sure. Because
I don't think it's necessary. I just think I would have liked it a little bit more.
Right, because there's another woman in the scene who I don't think she's ever even named.
Nope. And you don't see her again, I don't think.
She appears a little later on, but that's it. She's the one who like sews Seagrave into the Jane Mansfield costume. But then she vanishes. But like really the person that really draws your attention in this scene is Gabrielle, who's played by Rosanna Arquette, because she is.
I do want to say though, when they're talking about Seagrave doing the Jane Mansfield reenactment, and the best line that he says is, "I want really big tits out to here so the audience can get all cut up and crushed on the dashboard." I'm like, oh God,
it's
man.
so intense. Yeah. Gabrielle is a woman in an elaborate Cronenberg medical device, which is a black leather body brace and a black lace body stocking. And she's over there rolling joints by candlelight.
But she does have one breast exposed. Like there's a hole in the brace for one breast to be exposed. And it's like, see, this is the kind of shit that like, I don't know if you needed it. I know it's your brand, but you're already on the line.
Yeah. Vaughn immediately engages with the bloodied Seagrave about working out the details of their next reenactment, which is a reenactment of the Jane Mansfield crash.
Now, fun fact, she was not actually decapitated.
No. And I like my little James Dean thing. I'll talk about that when we get there, because that's it's actually somehow worse.
Yeah.
So Vaughn then takes Ballard aside into a room full of photos and shows him his next project. But it's just a photo book of crash scene photos of the people in the other room. And he shows him pictures of Gabrielle being removed from her car. And then as Ballard turns the page, he finds photos of him and Helen fucking in the car at the airport. But he isn't terribly bothered by this.
And like, I think this is probably the part when I was like, oh, I think this is a good movie. Because Elias Koteas, from the moment, like here on, he's great in that crash reenactment. But from here on, he is such a squirrely son of a bitch that you were just like, I don't like when he's on screen, and yet I also am fascinated by him.
Right.
Like, he's so edgy.
In this scene, it's not just Ballard like flipping through this. Vaughn is like right on his neck, breathing.
Yeah, and he is psychotic.
He's sort of tentatively reaching for him, but then retracting his hand and shit. It's
like Nosferatu.
Yes,
and he does it. He's so good at it that he is just like, I don't know. He makes it very unnerving to watch, and all the points in this movie, because he becomes progressively more unhinged. I mean, he starts pretty fucking unhinged, but he gets worse and worse as it goes on. And every time I'm just like, oh no. Oh, what are you going to do? Oh, Don Piano.
Oh, Long Johnson.
Oh, no.
So when Ballard asks what the project is, Vaughn tells him it's the reshaping of the body by modern technology, which is what a lot of people used to describe the themes of Cronenberg's own works in the 80s, after he passed out of his sort of 70s monster movie period.
My note says it's the reshaping of the human body by technology, and we have our thesis.
But it's not. We're going to get to that.
No.
Sometime later.
Because I think they bring that up later, and he's like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. And he's like, yeah, it's not really what it's about either.
Yeah. So sometime later, Ballard and Catherine drive home from his office in their respective cars. Ballard admires her in the reflection of the side view mirror as she nervously picks at the registration sticker in the window, when all of a sudden, here comes Vaughn in his giant car behind Catherine's little convertible. And then as they drive away, Vaughn pursues her aggressively, like pulling up on her very suddenly and backing off.
It is perfectly tense. It is so good.
Yeah, doing this several times before she pulls aside to a gas station and he drives away. So that...
Well, not really. He follows her into the gas station. Then he sees Ballard pulling behind them, and he sort of smirks and drives away.
Right. So
there's what is sort of suggested is that he's going to get out, but then he shows up and he takes off.
Right. Yeah. So that night, aroused by their encounter with Vaughn, Ballard.
Oh no, Ballard. Oh, this part.
Ballard and Catherine fuck some more, but this time in the character of it is way different. She talks to Ballard.
The dialogue in this scene is so bad and so awkward and uncomfortable.
There is a line that I'm going to say it.
Okay, because it's probably the same one I have in mind.
I guarantee it is. She talks to Ballard the whole time, questioning him about his attraction to Vaughn, and she is really into the idea of Ballard fucking this guy. And it is a long scene, and she is very, very explicit. She asks,
the most clinical and bizarre way possible. Now that apparently was intentional.
Yeah. Yeah,
he wants it to feel so detached.
Yeah.
And so that's why she uses words like anus. And it's just like, this is so strange. Why are you talking like this?
It is so bizarre. But also she asks, she sort of envisions a scene of him unzipping, and I quote, his greasy jeans. And,
nice.
And grabbing his penis. So
that was not the line I have.
Oh no, really? Because that line, you want to unzip his greasy jeans. I'm like, what?
Nope. Because what she says is, Vaughn's semen must be very salty.
That's right. Oh God.
What?
Yep. Yeah,
and it's just like, I can't imagine a less sexy conversation.
Oh no, salty semen and greasy jeans.
You've heard my new band?
Yes. So yeah,
it's a duo. It's a guitar and drums.
Oh boy. So the big takeaway here, however, is that Ballard's direct experience with the crash and Catherine's flirtation with Vaughn crashing his car into hers takes their sex life in a surprising new direction.
My other note says, James, your new friends are very strange.
So now, sometime later, Helen and Ballard return to the airport for more car sex, but now that he's been introduced to Vaughn and is sort of closer to the catastrophe fetish than ever before, it's not as exciting or satisfying as the first time, and so it's kind of like a twist now that Ballard is closer to his wife than ever. Because they're doing it again, but it doesn't have any of the urgency or any of that shit. And it's like you pointed out, she's facing away from him, which is kind of like the way that Ballard and his wife have sex.
Right.
Yeah.
And every time they're all kind of getting off on ideas of being with other people.
Yeah.
Or the other person being with other people. It's not about the intimacy between who they're with. It's very masturbatory in this way of like, it's about them thinking about being with someone else or something else.
Yeah, because as we get a little deeper, the sort of definition of what it is that they're chasing kind of like really kind of comes into clarity, and it really doesn't have much to do with the cars so much as it is they're chasing death. Really, is what they're chasing. So,
or they're chasing something to death.
Yeah.
Whatever that pursuit is leading them towards death.
Yeah. So at Vaughn's Flophouse, the Crash people all sit around anxiously watching crash test footage on a VCR while Seagrave is sewn into his Jane Mansfield costume. When the VCR glitches and pauses on a frame, Helen leaps up suddenly, agitated like an addict who's no longer getting what she needs. She chills out when the tape resumes.
And I feel like this is her sort of full immersion into this group.
Yeah. So at night, Vaughn and Ballard drive in the Plymouth, hitting guardrails for fun. This is
where he explains to him why he drives that car.
Yes, yeah, because they're talking about Vaughn's desire to drive a famous crash car. Talks about Albert Camus' Facel Vega, which I looked up. It's a really neat looking car. It's a really fancy little.
I bet he thought so too. Yeah, well, until
Yeah, and also Nathaniel West's station wagon. Both writers were kind of killed in a rather banal accidents, which somehow cemented their legacies in the same way that Dean's did. Also, that week that I got out of rehab, I also read The Stranger in that string of really bleak fiction.
I feel like you picked bad books. There's a lot more hopeful shit out there you could have been reading.
I was in a bad place, man. So we learned the reason that Vaughn drives the car that he does is because it's the same type of car that carried John F. Kennedy on the day that he was shot, suggesting that it's not the cars and the wreckage that excites these people, but the closeness to death that gets them off.
Yeah.
So Vaughn shows Ballard a series of photos that he uses for references in staging his reenactments. Among them are the crash scene photos of the Jane Mansfield death. So the Jane Mansfield crash occurred at 2 a.m. on June 29th, 1967. Mansfield, riding in the front seat with her boyfriend, Sam Brody, and her driver, Ron Harrison, collided with the rear end of a tractor trailer at high speed, which they couldn't see because of the nearby chemical spraying to kill mosquitoes, which created a thick fog. And so the body of the car drove under the trailer, but the upper part of the cabin was sheared off as they drove, basically instantly killing everybody in the front seat. Her children were in the back and survived unharmed because they were asleep.
Yeah. Thank God Olivia Benson didn't die.
I know. Fucking God, that alternate history there.
Yeah. We would have no SVU.
Yeah. Because of this, there were rumors that Jane Mansfield was decapitated in the accident because there are photos that you can see of this where her wig came off and it's on like the hood of the car.
It's like embedded in the windshield.
Yeah, and so everybody sort of assumed that her head came off. It's actually far fucking worse than that, where she was kind of sort of scalped, and like basically the top part of her head was sort of like knocked off. So just like, oh God, it's even worse. You almost kind of wish that it was something as simple as just her entire head coming off. Like, what the fuck? So Ballard tells him that the crash fetish is satisfying in a way that he doesn't understand, and Vaughn delivers a very J.G. Ballard line here. It's a benevolent psychopathology which beckons toward us. I have no idea what that means, but
it also feels very Cronenbergian.
It's a hell of a line.
I mean, it is again, it's that idea of the death drive. It's this idea that we are all being absent of like these kind of social norms and adherence to, those, we're all sort of just driven to death. Like there's nothing else but that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because that is what this is a movie about extreme alienation and isolation. Yeah. So yeah, Vaughn's mysterious project is to examine that, to get close to death and one day have that experience.
Now, in truth, Vaughn is just a lunatic.
He's just a maniac. Ballard says that he thought that the reshaping of the human body through modern technology was his project, and Vaughn, as Cronenberg, dismisses the entire notion, letting us all know that he's basically done with that period of his career.
Which I like. I think it's
a smart way. It's a smart way to sort of say goodbye. Yeah. So then they pick up a prostitute that's just hanging out in a parking garage, I guess.
Yeah, it feels a very inefficient way to pick up clients, doesn't it?
Who knows, man? Like maybe it's a happening spot. I don't know.
Because she's right on like the it's one of those circular ones where like you kind of have to drive in a big spiral to get up to whatever floor you're on, and she's just sort of on the edge. It's like you can't stop there, as is evident by this movie.
Yeah. So James drives while Vaughn kind of violently manipulates her body in the backseat of the car.
I don't care for this part.
So at Ballard's studio, Vaughn is questioned by police about a pedestrian that was killed at the airport, which isn't Vaughn's style, but he's also visibly shaken and anxious about this.
Yeah, these people spend an awful lot of time at the airport, that's how you know they're bad people.
They just hang in liminal spaces.
Yeah.
Ballard volunteers to drive him home. While getting ready to leave, Vaughn takes off his shirt, revealing a roadmap of scars up and down his abdomen, which grabs Catherine's attention. And then she rides in the back of the massive Lincoln with Vaughn. Along the way, they pick up radio chatter of a terrible road accident, and they drive over to see it. They are, for some reason, allowed to just drive through the scene and walk around, taking pictures.
Yeah, the police have nothing to say about them just sort of casually driving their car into an accident scene.
Yeah, walking around taking pictures of the accident victims and the responders and shit. Vaughn places Catherine in the scene among the victims, putting her in one of the cars, sort of seeming...
Oh, this part is creepy as shit.
It is, and I love it. He's seeming to like guide her into her world here. And among the victims, unfortunately, is Seagrave in his Mansfield costume. And Vaughn is disappointed that Seagrave
with the dog in the back.
Yeah, and he's like, you even did the dog.
That part is great, though.
He's disappointed that he did it without him, but he's like admiring the guy's work. Yeah. Also, he's pretty turned on by this. So when Ballard finds blood on Vaughn's car, he announces that they'll take it through a car wash to clean it up. And while in the car wash, Vaughn violently fucks Catherine in the back.
I really don't like this scene.
I don't know what to make of it. That's the thing.
Because she's not, well, and I think, again, that's probably intentional, but like, it's kind of a rape scene. You're never quite sure if it is, but like at a certain point, it becomes clear she's not that into it.
It goes further than she was expecting it to, I think.
Yeah, and in a way that I really don't like watching, and the sound design is so aggressive.
Yep. And then that's sort of at the peak of it, she sort of like flops her slimy hand on Ballard's car.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that salty semen.
I know. I don't want to know about that.
Yeah.
Put your greasy jeans back on. Get the fuck out of the car wash, you weirdos.
Yeah. So then, like later back at Ballard's place, like he's in bed with her, and we see her, and she's just got vicious bruises like all over her body.
Yeah, and she doesn't like. He kind of tries to touch her, and she's crying. It's like I don't like it.
Yeah. So sometime later, Ballard accompanies Gabrielle to a Mercedes dealership where she grinds her shit all up on one of the cars.
Yeah, she does. And, I think she says it's a car. It's designed for a normal body or something. And my note just says, yuck.
Yeah, but she says it in a really kind of like alluring, sexy way. Because she's also
again, this is a very confrontational moment.
Yeah, because she's like leaning over and her like fucking legs are spread and shit. And this is when we see this like really vaginal scar on the back of her leg. And she conscripts one of the poor dealers in the place into whatever it is that she's doing here by having her help her into the car. And so later in Gabrielle's car, which is full of equipment to facilitate her disability, she and Ballard fuck, but not just that. He fully goes down on that vaginal leg wound and then fucks the wound, which raises a lot of questions that I'm not sure I care to pursue.
Nah, it's not worth it. You don't want to know. I think this scene does not need to be here at all. It doesn't do anything for it. It is intentionally, it's gratuitous, it's intentionally sensational. It's like, yeah.
It's the Cronenberg signature. He's got to have.
But it feels like he had a moment of clarity and was like, oh, I got to do something. How about you fuck her leg?
I know. He's like, I got to put some rubber shit in here somewhere.
And it's like, you didn't need to, your movie is very good. You didn't need to do that. And now you've kind of given people a reason to focus on this dumb thing instead of the actual very smart movie you're making.
This is definitely the scene that outraged people the most. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
and I don't think it's outrageous. I just think it doesn't need to be there.
It's over the top in a very silly way.
It's just kind of dumb. And like, I think to him, he's probably like,
probably.
But to me, it's kind of like, all right, but now you've just turned a bunch of people off to your movie and it's really good. They should see this.
Yeah. Vaughn then calls Ballard and work tells him, he calls him at work rather, tells him that he needs to see him. Ballard catches up with him.
This is also the first time we see Holly Hunter in like, she like disappears from the movie for like a good 30 minutes.
Yeah. So Ballard catches up with him at the airport hospital, receiving a tattoo in the shape of the steering wheel in his Lincoln on his chest. And he also hands Ballard a design in the shape of the Lincoln hood ornament with the intention of Ballard receiving the tattoo as well, a sort of passing of the torch for the project. And then in one of the movie's most unexpected scenes, Ballard then fucking his giant car. Vaughn,
and then so he licks his tattoo, and it's like, don't do that.
I was like, it's a fresh tattoo. God, you're gonna infect the whole thing.
There's so much gross shit happening right there. You don't want to do that.
Yeah. But Vaughn, usually the dominant one, sort of gives up that position to Ballard, and then Ballard does all the sort of same body manipulation violence that we've seen Vaughn do up to this point.
I'm going to stop you here because this is something very interesting. There's two things about this that I think are very interesting. So I'll start with the one I learned today when I was watching the press conference. So one of the reporters says, I saw this movie last night. I've talked to a lot of people about it. And a lot of people have asked me, why is there not more male nudity or more frontal male nudity in this movie? And it's a fair question, given the subject matter and given how much of the women's bodies we see in this.
Yeah.
And they all kind of fumble the answer, and they're all sort of like, well, you know, grumble, grumble, grumble. And it's kind of like, oh, you're uncomfortable talking about this. And I think that is evident in this particular scene. You have two dudes fucking. Mm-hmm. We just watched him fuck some lady's leg. And they are so precious and awkward with this gay sex scene that it is embarrassing to watch. 'Cause it's like, you know, and like, whatever. Like, I'm not saying it needs to be gratuitous like the rest of the movie, but it's like, you want to include this. I think this happens in a lot of his movies where it's like, you want to go there, but you also don't know how to go there and you're too afraid to do it.
Which is crazy because here's the thing. By this point in the movie, this is not, it's not that Ballard is like bisexual or anything. This scene is sort of emblematic of the sort of evolution of this fetish, that sexuality, as far as sort of like gender preference goes, is completely beside the point. It has
They're at a point where they're just pushing boundaries, like going and going and going to find whatever the next thing is, regardless of what that thing actually is.
Yeah.
I think given that it's 1996, 97, it's a little bit problematic to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit problematic to do it anyway, just given the power of all of that. But I understand it, and I'm not offended by the scene. I just feel like it's like, oh, this is exploitation that's a little bit beneath you, and you're wielding it in a way that tells me you're not comfortable with this.
It's wimpy in a way that undercuts the sort of message that he's trying to convey with this whole fucking story. Yeah.
Like, and I again, you see this in other, he sort of pulls punches every now and then in other movies where it's like, well, then why did you include this? I can only assume then that he thinks it works, but it's like, it doesn't.
It's the thing is, it's a pivotal moment in the book that had to be in the movie. And he just was like kind of grossed out by it. But like, Yeah, so this is him sort of tap dancing around something that he's just not comfortable with, which is too
and
bad.
You can see it when the reporter asks the same question about like, why did you've gone out of your way to expose women in this movie, and now you have this sex scene with men, and even when when there's hetero sex scenes, you never see them really nude, and it's kind of like. You want to push boundaries, and yet at the same time, you're still adhering to these sort of gender norms and sort of kind of heteronormativity, which you see in all of his other movies too, where it's like, oh, you want to push these boundaries so much, but even The Brood is about you being mad at a woman for leaving or for being crazy or whatever, like for women be shopping. I don't know what, but like you want to be this really edgy guy, and yet underneath all of that, you're still that same straight white dude who's a little bit shocked that some businessman got a tattoo. It's like you're kind of showing your cards a little bit here.
Yeah. When they have finished, I assume that Vaughn put his greasy jeans back on. Ballard limps.
Well, we all know about his salty semen at this point. So.
Ballard limps into a nearby wreckage yard and sits inside a big ass vehicle similar to Vaughn's, like really feeling it out. In a weird sort of farewell, Vaughn drives his Lincoln into the car twice in a sort of ramming motion that by now we should all be very familiar with in terms of symbolism.
Yeah. It's a real greasy ramming motion.
So the next day, Catherine alerts James to some damage done to her car. Ballard runs his hands over the gash in the car in the same way that Vaughn did on the Spider at the James Dean crash and announces that it was Vaughn that did it. And so now, as they drive along the highway at night, Vaughn violently pulls into the lane behind them and follows them, driving recklessly, pushing them around the road, bumping them until he pulls off and crashes off screen.
I think what could have been a really spectacular moment. I just don't think they had the money to do it.
Yeah, because it's just, you hear him like...
Because he lands on top of a bus.
He does.
Upside down.
Yeah, he drives like through the guardrail in off the highway onto like a stretch of road below, like crashing into a bus. And all we can, presumably he is dead in this accident here. So, Sometime later, Helen and Gabrielle sneak into the wreckage yard where Vaughn's car is kept and have sex in what's left of the car, while Catherine and Ballard talk to the guy at the booth about claiming the car.
Yeah, and Catherine says the car belonged to a close friend, and I was like, I don't know if I'd call him a close friend. I mean, he did try to kill you a couple times, and he raped you too. So, yeah. But still, the guy at the garage is just like, well, you can claim it, but you got to get those two lesbians out of the back yourself. So.
Yeah, so maybe it's the next day. Who could say really? But we see Ballard.
Doesn't matter.
We see Ballard driving recklessly in a car similar to Vaughn's beat up Lincoln, unless it is Vaughn's beat up Lincoln.
I think it is,
like restored
because this symbolically, I think we're supposed to understand he is now Vaughn.
Yeah. So he catches up with Catherine's little Mazda, just like Vaughn did. He ritually harasses her. She takes her seatbelt off, preparing for what's to come, and he bumps her several times until she slides off the highway and turns over in a ditch.
My note says, great, you killed your wife. Good job.
So Ballard stops and finds her car turned over on the grass, takes in the scope of the destruction before checking on her. He finds her there, sprawled out on the wreckage, skirt pulled up around her waist, dazed and bloody, but otherwise unhurt. And when she tells him with more than a little disappointment that she thinks she's all right, he tells her, maybe the next one. And then they fuck.
Yeah.
Roll credits.
And I thought that's going to be real awkward for the paramedics.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, Crash.
What a movie.
Crash, man. What a fucking movie. It's deceptively simple in its presentation. I can understand why people watched it and completely misunderstood what was going on with this, thinking that this was like a Cronenberg making a sex movie.
And I think that is where he sort of he kind of shot himself in the foot with this NC-17 rating and all of this kind of controversy around it. Is like, you have got a really good, very interesting movie here that you've really turned a lot of people off to because of the dumb shit you sort of shoehorned in there when you didn't have to. Well, it's not shoehorned in, but it doesn't need to be there.
No, it's sensationalism.
And unfortunately, it kind of undermines everything else. It's like, you could have done something. I mean, you did do something really awesome. And
I do agree with you that there's a lot in there that it didn't need, for sure. I do love the leg wound scene just because it's fucked up and crazy and weird. But also, the movie would have been the same movie without it.
Right.
And I think...
Yeah, I mean, if you could have it in there and get away with, like, no, it wouldn't change anybody's opinion, fine, leave it in. I'm not offended by it. I think it's a little bit dumb, but... And that's... I think my problem is that it borders on immature every once in a while, where it's like, you're being oppositional and you're being defiant right now when you don't need to be, because you've created something very fascinating and very cool, and yet you're pushing buttons because you feel like you're supposed to, or because that's what your brand is or whatever. And it's like, you're better than that. You don't need to do that.
Yeah. It's the thing that I've seen him, like, in interviews and shit. He loves to fucking provoke people. And that's the net result of it when he does it while he's making a movie. Like, going back to that thing I said, that, like, moron horror movie fan in me loves that shit. But this is him, like, exiting that period. Like, until Crimes of the Future, I don't think he does any of that weird no, there's a little of that in Existence, but he kind of leaves all that shit behind as he kind of, like, moves into the next phase of his career.
But one gets the feeling he didn't know quite how to do that, because he doesn't get out clean.
No.
Because this is a sophisticated movie. It is smart, it is dramatic, it is tense, it is incredible. And yet he still feels compelled to put in these sort of, like, horror-y, sci-fi, very sensational things. And it's like, you're not helping yourself by doing that. You're making your movie lesser than it should be.
It's almost like he didn't quite, which is crazy because he's made a million fucking movies up to this point. He didn't quite have the confidence to leave the trademark behind and just make a fucking movie without the gross rubber shit in it.
And I think that's what I mean when I say it feels a little bit immature. It lacks that confidence that, like, I can make an adult, an adult movie, quote unquote. Like, I can make a drama or a thriller, because this feels very much like a noir film. Like, this is a sort of neo-noir, very sexy, but very provocative, very confrontational. If you had left out all that dumb shit, this would be a huge fucking milestone of a movie.
Yeah.
This would be Lost Highway. This would be Blue Velvet. It would be something that important. And yet, because he wasn't confident in his ability to do that, and he left this other stuff in, it gets lumped in with movies like Showgirls, or it gets forgotten about as, like, oh, that's Cronenberg's sex movie. It's like, it's not a sex movie. It's an anti-sex movie.
Yeah, this is the antithesis of the 90s erotic thriller. It's him being like, fuck all that shit.
Yeah.
God, I fucking love it. I think it's it's why I put it why I put it up there in my top 3 is I do love the gross, gory stuff, but even when he was doing that, he had a couple of movies he made where the message was way, way more sophisticated than I think horror movie fans were expecting. Mm-hmm. But he realized that it was there and was like, I need to sort of move into a space where I can make more of those. And he kind of eases into that. And so the movies that really sort of embrace that sophistication are the ones that I love the most, because I think he's an extremely fucking smart man.
Oh, yeah. And you could see that in everything he does.
Yeah. And the stories that he tells are perverse and weird and confrontational in a way that just ticks a lot of boxes for me. And this is the one that I think really just almost gets there. It's unfortunately just a little undercooked in the end. And when we get towards a certain point, really, it's the tattoo moment. It's kind of like, he's like, shit, I'm running out of time, yada, yada, yada. Vaughn dies, the end.
Yeah, it does feel very rushed to its conclusion.
Yeah.
But I think that's, I don't know, but for better or worse, I guess. I mean, it's sort of like, I'm kind of done with it by then too.
Yes, because
like you said all you wanted to say, and now we're just sort of like, where do we go from here?
I know, and the thing is it's not a long movie. It's only about 100 minutes long, but by that time, it's like, oh Jesus, I feel like I've been here all night. Like it does start to feel a little long, but otherwise,
so I definitely would not. I still wouldn't put it in my top 3. I think it is a very good movie. It is underseen. It is underappreciated. I think it demonstrates that this is what David Cronenberg has been doing all along. And I think that is why he appeals to me as well. It's like, I would not ordinarily this is not how I would approach these themes, but I am fascinated by these themes. I'm drawn to them all the time. I would not talk about them this way. I would not present them this way, but I love that he wants to talk about them, and he wants to talk about them in his way. Mm-hmm. This is his way. He's not quite comfortable there. He's not going to be comfortable in the next one or with any more clarity in the next one, but he is always moving forward. It's an evolution, and he stumbles a little bit, and he's not afraid to stumble, and I appreciate that as well.
He recovers very neatly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it is, is it one of my favorites? No, I still think it is an incredible movie. I think a lot of people need to see it way more than have seen it. So I hope they do.
Yeah. Fucking A. Crash, David Cronenberg, 1996. What's next?
Well, we are on, as you said, Bring Me the Axe. We will be doing The Fog. And we'll be following up The Fog. It's going to be a John Carpenter twofer.
Ooh, yeah.
Because after The Fog, we're going to be talking Assault on Precinct 13, one of my other favorite John Carpenter movies.
Awesome. Yeah, I love me some John Carpenter. All right, so be back here in a week. Pick up as we make sweet love to John Carpenter's The Fog. And then, and then we'll be back in 2 to do Assault on Precinct 13.